Okay, so we're starting out with our 1112 Explorer, which is used to explore the entire dentition. It's a calculus detection using tactile sensitivity and more. So for starters, this is the tip third and the working end of the instrument. And this right here is a terminal shank, and this is the handle. So the way you determine which is the correct end is you want to make sure the terminal shank is parallel to the long axis of the tooth. So let's see. What you do is you use your fulcrum and you stand it up, and if it's parallel to the long axis of the tooth, then that is the correct working end. So if I would use this other end, it kind of goes across the tooth, so that would make it wrong. You also want to make sure you have a correct fulcrum, because if you do not, that would make, if you have an incorrect fulcrum, it can make your instrument look correct either way on whichever end. So that's why you want to make sure you have a correct fulcrum. So we have determined that this is the correct working end. So you want to hold the instrument with a modified pin grasp, like a C, and you want to start at the distal line angle, and then you want to use short or long overlapping strokes, and when you want to come back through to the mesial, you roll it, and you want to come up all the way through the contacts. Don't stop at the contacts, you want to come up all the way through it. Okay, so let's start at this one. You want to make sure you use your wrist and not your fingers. Insert and come around, and then you roll. And you want to make sure you adapt the entire time. Okay, so now this is the periodontal probe. To start out, this is what it looks like. This right here is the handle, of course, the shank, the working end, and these are the little black things you see is what is used to help you measure. So basically what a probe is used for is it's used in the early patient's examination, so the patient's periodontal status can be determined. It can examine things like pocket depths, gingival consistency, attachment levels, furcation involvement, and much more. Okay, so make sure you have the correct working end, which is this. You want to make sure it's parallel to the long axis of the tooth. Try to make sure you can see it. You want to have a strong fulcrum. You want to start at the distal line angle. First, you want to have a light grasp, and you want to gently slide in until you feel resistance at the distal line angle. And you want to go distal. Then you want to come back around to the mesial. You want to use walking strokes. You want to pivot on your fulcrum. Okay, distal line angle. Go distal. Walking strokes. Pivoting on your fulcrum. You want to make sure you don't slide so you can access each area of the sulcus. Okay, so this is the 1112 Gracie curette. It's a area specific curette. It removes deep subgingival calculus. It's angulated to reach mesial surfaces of the posterior teeth. It can be used for deep scaling, root planing, periodontal debridement, and more. If you can't tell, this one's much less bending than the 1314, which I'll show you that one in a minute. All right, so this one has a toe third instead of a tip third. It also has a face and a cutting edge. So let's see how we can determine which is the correct working end on the tooth. Okay, so with this one, we want to also test it in between our premolars. The way you can tell if you have the correct end is first you can look and see where your blade is, if that's what you want to do, and that's the easiest to me. But if you can't tell that way, you can put it in between your premolars, and the first bin closest to the cutting edge should be pointing towards the back of the mouth. As you can tell, the first bin is pointing towards the back of the mouth, which is the posterior. Let's see. So this would be wrong. It would be wrong because the first bin is pointing towards the anterior of the mouth, the anterior teeth. So first way we had it was correct. You want to make sure you have a great fulcrum standing up to make sure your instrument is parallel. Okay, so let's get started. So find the cutting edge and we place it on the tooth. Make sure you guys can see me. And this is a mesial instrument, so we want to start in the middle third of the tooth. You want to use lots of lateral pressure and strokes, good wrist motion, and you want to use a modified pin grass. So here we go. And you want to go adapt all the way around the tooth and go around. Come out and go to the next one. Make sure you're adapting, coming up through the contacts, wrist motion. Just like that. Okay, so this is the 1314 area specific curette. It's used for the distal surfaces. It's a specific area specific curette angulated to reach distal surfaces of the posterior teeth. This one is more bendy than the 1112, as I said earlier. It can be used for periodontal debridements, root planing, deep scalings, and more. And this is what it looks like. This is the toe third, and this is the terminal shank. So let's see. The way that we can find out if this is the correct instrument, we do the premolar test again. The bin has to be just like the 1112, the closest bin. The first bin closest to the cutting edge should be pointing towards the back of the mouth, which it is, as you can see. If it was incorrect, it would look like this. It would kind of go across the tooth, and the first bin is pointing towards the anterior teeth. Okay. So let's get back to the correct one. That's correct. So you want to use a sturdy fulcrum, firm fulcrum. And this is used for the distal. So you want to go in, you want to use lateral pressure. Make sure you're adapting all the way. Come out. You can use oblique strokes, horizontal strokes. If you have deep pockets, then you'll have room to do all those type of strokes to help get the tenacious calculus out. Don't pull it out like that though, when you're in a real patient's mouth. So this is the 204S. It's used for root planing and scaling procedures. It removes calculus above and below the gingiva. It has double working ends. So let's get started. So the way to see if this is the correct working end is if the bend is pointing posterior. which that was the correct way. So if it wasn't the correct way, it would look like this, I'm guessing. Yep. Point towards the anterior, and your hand would be all weird looking. So you want to have a strong, firm fulcrum. If the shank comes across the tooth, like we stated above, it's incorrect, which that's what it would look like. All right. So to me, the 204S is kind of universal. You can use it mesial, distal, and use horizontal strokes to come across the facial. So let's see. And if you want to do horizontal, oh, can you see me? Horizontal strokes. Come up across the mesial, then kind of roll it and then come back up. Horizontal strokes. Coming up through the contacts. Use your horizontal strokes on the facial, or then come back up through the mesial. Using a wrist motion with strong fulcrum. Make sure you're adapting to the entire tooth.